Before we start today's episode, we have two brand new Red Eye Core crew members, Laura and Ben. Thank you so much for donating a few dollars or pounds a month just to help us make this podcast. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy these episodes. A couple of episodes ago, we mentioned that aviation is an industry wrapped up in rules. From flight plans to duty hours, on the ground and in the air, it's rules, rules, rules. And for the most part, we follow them. We go to work, we follow those rules, and then we go home. Simple. But not everyone is a lover or a devoted follower of rules. And while most of us might bend a small one here and there are those who simply do not draw the line at all. To them, if a rule gets in the way of something they really want to do, then they might just break it completely, regardless of the repercussions. This week's story is one of those where we were only given the shocking bit, or as we like to say, the true part. It's the bit that you can't quite believe. So in an effort to imagine everything that happened around it, we're handing this one over to our old favourite, Julie Margot, to see what she did when the situation quite literally bared all.
Doors to armed and cross-check.
Come fly the red eye.
Welcome aboard the Red Eye.
Thailand to London. Cara raised her sunglasses and watched as her handsome man walked out of the sea. He was perfect. Toned from hours spent in the gym, tanned from sunbeds and topped up here in paradise, and now, with seawater making his skin shimmer and a small pair of shorts showing exactly what else he had to offer, well, let's just say she knew she was a lucky girl. Perhaps he wasn't the brightest. That was his only flaw. But then again, neither was she. So did it really matter? He stopped a few feet away and turned to look thoughtfully back at the water. Cara picked up her phone, the latest Samsung she'd upgraded to purely for the camera, and angled it without a word. She clicked away until she had a few dozen solid shots. He didn't need to ask her to do that. She knew the signals. You see, Cara and Perry were influencers. Cara was cabin crew, yes, but her Instagram was exploding, and she was pretty damn sure that in the not-too-distant future she wouldn't need this job at all. The lifestyle would be funded by photos like these. She flipped the camera on herself and took a quick selfie. "Thanks," Perry said as he stretched out on the lounger beside her, taking the phone to scroll through the images. Perry had already made it. He earned money from paid partnerships, but more importantly, he'd been on TV. A reality show that had given him an army of loyal fans who followed his every mood. While Cara had 50,000 followers, Perry had 400,000. He was exactly where she wanted to be. And while he was reluctant to post anything with her just yet, in case the single puppies dropped off in protest, there was no doubt in her mind that he could help her get there. And then, when they were both up there, floating on that cloud of success, they could travel the world together, making vlogs and TikToks, being paid to live the life she'd always dreamed of. "Had we better go and get ready?" Perry asked. Cara glanced at her watch. "Yeah," she sighed, pushing herself up from the lounger. It had been 3 perfect days in paradise, but he was right. They needed to get ready for the flight home, and she needed to switch herself back into flight attendant mode for a full cabin. She didn't want to go. She wanted to stay right here, sun on her skin, Perry by her side. But that was how it was. For now, at least. One day, she wouldn't have to go anywhere until she was ready. Where's your fella sitting? Jess asked from the galley. Cara poked her head into the aisle. I haven't seen him yet. She felt the nervous flutter settle in her stomach. He had to get on. He had to get an upgrade. He needed the first-class pics. I still can't believe you're dating him. Oh, you're so lucky. How did you meet again? Cara barely registered the question, her attention fixed on the jetway. The truth was, they'd only been together for a few months. And while she was usually confident, Perry could have any girl he wanted. She felt the pressure of always needing to be the one he chose. She caught her reflection in the galley fridge and ran a finger under her eye. She was good enough, pretty enough, but she had to keep him interested, had to make sure he didn't get bored. Bringing him on this trip had been a part of that plan. Squeezing him into a middle seat in economy, or worse, leaving him behind, absolutely wasn't. I asked where you met, Jess repeated. Oh, online, Cara said absently, craning her neck. And then she saw him. He was moving slowly up the jetway, unmistakably Perry, and her breath caught as he stepped through the aircraft door. She held it as the crew member took his boarding card. And then her stomach sank. The finger pointed right, straight into economy. Sorry, love, she said as he reached her, offering an apologetic smile. Perry shrugged and gave a small one back, but Cara caught it in his eyes. Disappointment. He'd probably already planned the photos, the angles, the casual business class shots that said effortlessness and success. He needed his sleep to look good in the morning. Now he was going to have to fold all that muscle into a narrow seat for the long flight home. She touched his arm and he stopped. Leaning in close, she lowered her voice. I'll make it up to you. I promise. He gave her a curious look, and she gave him back a secretive smile before patting his arm gently and urging him on. At that exact moment, she had no idea how she was going to make it up to him, but she would think of something. She always did. He was sulking. Cara could tell by the way his lips pouted every time she passed him, by the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. But what could she do? The flight was full, and by all accounts he'd been lucky to get on at all. The ticket had been a steal, and even the middle seat at the exit row he'd landed was worth 10 times what she'd paid for it. Still, she had no one to blame but herself for his disappointment. She'd sold him a romantic getaway to Thailand with probable business class travel. She'd paid too, but she hadn't wanted to ruin it with the what-ifs, with talks of loads and upgrades and maybes. She just wanted it to feel seamless, perfect, like he was used to. And she felt the weight of his disappointment on her shoulders as she made her way to the back. The purser, Jane, looked up from her crew meal as Cara stepped into the galley. Babe, you're on first break. The sick bag was already clipped up, the breaks scrawled across it in thick pen. Cara squinted at the list, her heart lifting for just a fraction as she read it. 3 hours. Nice, she said. She hadn't slept much over the last 3 nights, staying up late and dragging herself out of bed early so she could look presentable before he woke up. 3 hours was as good as it got, and she would take it. Starts in 5 minutes, though. Sorry. Oh, okay. Cara glanced around. The others were shoveling food into their mouths before bed. But she'd only just finished duty-free. 5 minutes wasn't even enough for a chicken goujon. And then there was Perry. She needed to go back and say goodnight. Tell him where she was disappearing to so he wouldn't wonder. Maybe bring him a cheese board from first class? Or a nice glass of wine? Something thoughtful. Something that reminded him she was worth the inconvenience of economy. As she walked up the aisle, running through all the ways she could make him happy, another thought hit her so hard it almost stopped her in her tracks. She shook her head immediately. No, that was a terrible idea. One that went so far against the rules that only a fool would even consider it. And yet, it was as if she wasn't quite in control anymore. As the thought had entered her head, the sensible part of her brain had stepped out. She didn't say a word when she reached Perry. She just jerked her head towards the back and held up all 10 fingers, signalling for him to follow her in 10 minutes. And 10 minutes later, he appeared in the galley, curiosity written all over his face. "Oh, my love," Jane said, still buried in paperwork, the only one in the galley beside Cara. The others in the aisles or already tucked up in bed. "Did you have a nice trip?" Yes, thanks," Perry replied politely. Cara smiled, casual, as though her heart wasn't hammering in her chest. "Do you mind if he just stays here for a cuppa?" she asked. "I'll head up in a minute." Jane looked up. Of course not. I'm just popping up the front," Jane said, already gathering her papers. Once they were gone, Cara looked at him, saying nothing. She didn't need to. The chemistry between them crackled so loudly it felt almost physical. For a fleeting second, she was tempted to launch herself at him and kiss him senseless right there in the galley without a thought of being caught. But she had a better idea. She smiled at him, slow and deliberate, the kind of smile that promised mischief. He leaned in, his voice low, his face saying he could read her thoughts. "Mile High Club?" She nodded slowly. Yes. She was going to join the Mile High Club with this ridiculously handsome man. But, unlike everyone else she knew who had joined it, she wasn't going to be doing it in a cramped, minging aircraft toilet. No. If she was joining the club at 35,000 feet with someone who looked like that, she was going to be doing it in a freshly made bed. The flight manager, Julie, would be glad to get off. Up at the front of the aircraft, it was as though the passengers believed that an expensive ticket came with a license to behave like absolute idiots. They drained the champagne within 2 hours of takeoff, and if 3A complained about there being none left one more time, Julie wasn't sure she'd be able to stop herself. "Well, madam, you've personally put away 8 glasses of Laurent Perrier," she wanted to say. "And if we all drank like that, we'd need so much booze on board the aircraft we'd never get airborne." And her husband, with the bulbous, red-veined nose, was no better. All new money and no manners. A matching set. Down here, though, she realised as she finished her inner rant, it was blissfully calm. The lights were low, the cabin hushed. Everyone seemingly relaxed. Julie jumped. The sound was so loud it could have been a jackhammer drilling through the floor. Not relaxed then. Broken. She glanced around. Most of economy appeared to be completely unconscious, mouths open, limbs slack, victims of 2 weeks of all-inclusive and too much sun. In the galley, Jane was flicking through a magazine, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. "How is everything?" Julie asked. "Lovely and quiet," Jane replied. "Where did the companions end up?" Julie asked. There had been 3 of them, and she hadn't passed any on her way down. Oh, she hated squeezing them back here, but with no spare seats, there really hadn't been a choice. "Oh, 2 on the right, halfway up," Jane said, "and that TV guy's at the exit by the 3 doors." Julie smiled, relieved that at least he'd got the legroom. Not that she rated him much. From what she'd seen, he was rather full of himself. The pair of them had been inseparable all trip, to the point Julie had chosen a different patch of beach just to avoid watching their unnecessary and overacted displays of affection. Ugh, and the photos. They were just constant. She caught herself and forced a kinder smile. Was she just being grumpy? These days she was no longer sure whether it was just her and her menopausal mood swings when she felt irritated, and so she tried to keep a lid on her real thoughts as much as she could. "Oh, good," she said lightly. "Glad he got some legroom." "I was more worried about his big head," Jane muttered. Julie laughed, despite herself. Perhaps it wasn't just her, then. "Okay, call me if you need me," she said, heading back down the aisle. As she reached the 3 doors, she instinctively looked for him. That perfectly styled hair should have been easy to spot. But his seat was empty. Toilet? She thought, except the nearest toilet lights were green. Vacant. She shrugged it off and returned to the front, refused further alcohol to 3A and her husband, and made herself a calming cup of chamomile tea. She didn't think about it again until 45 minutes later, when she passed the exit row once more, and his seat was still empty. Back in the galley, she stopped short. "Jane, where is Cara's companion?" Jane looked up from her magazine, now perched on her jump seat. L3. Why?" "Have you seen him recently? And he hasn't been in his seat the last 2 times I've passed." Jane frowned. "No, She stopped. Her eyes drifted very slowly to the small crew rest door beside the galley. Julie followed her gaze. "No," Julie said, disbelief creeping into her voice. No, they wouldn't. Would they?" She turned to the other crew. "Girls, have either of you seen Cara?" She went on a break," one replied. "And her companion?" 2 heads shook in unison, and all 4 of them looked at the door. Julie felt heat rise up her neck, sharp and sudden, and she moved to act. She used to think things through. She used to pause, but no, not lately. "Oh, no," she said, already punching the keypad. "Absolutely not on my flight." The door slid open, and she reached inside, flicking on the master light switch and flooding the crew rest with brightness. And then she hauled herself up the ladder. Curtains rustled, and murmurs followed as sleepy crews squinted and tried to work out what was happening. "Cara," Julie called sharply. "Where are you?" Faces appeared, one by one, blinking and startled. A moment or 2 later, at the far end, she spotted Cara's unmistakable fake eyelashes peeking out. Julie moved at lightning speed. Without room to stand in the small space, she crawled down the narrow aisle on all 4s like a woman possessed, and without hesitation, yanked the curtain aside. Later, she would regret acting so quickly. Later, she would wonder whether she should have allowed them at least a moment of dignity. But in that moment, any restraint had left her entirely. What greeted her behind Cara's curtain was unmistakable. And it was very, very much not airline policy. The last of the passengers finally filed off the aircraft, and Julie let out a long breath. What a flight. And what a mountain of paperwork awaited her now. At an age where her brain sometimes felt a little bit like cotton wool, in that moment it felt like far too much. As expected, a manager appeared at the top of the jetway and walked toward them, his expression appropriately grave. Cara materialised at her side, already in her ground shoes and jacket, wheelie bag neatly positioned as though this were any other arrival. There was no mystery about what was coming next. There would be a statement to make, and an investigation would follow. Only the outcome remained unknown. Julie turned away to zip up her bag, but she could still hear Cara's voice carrying down the cabin as they sat together in business class. So, Cara was saying earnestly, it was exactly as I just explained. I felt really unwell, and I didn't want to disturb the others in crew rest, so I just texted my boyfriend to come and help me out. Julie rolled her eyes so hard it almost hurt. She'd already heard the story. The flimsy, hastily stitched-together excuse that had been plucked from thin air and delivered with alarming confidence. Julie had listened, nodded, and used every ounce of self-control not to dismantle it piece by piece. But now, she was done. Utterly done. If she didn't get off this aircraft soon, she was fairly sure she might actually lose what remained of her sanity. The rest of the crew had already disembarked. Only Julie and the captain remained, standing in the doorway in silence, exchanging looks that said everything without a word. She'd told him exactly what she'd seen. Others had too. None of it matched the story currently being performed a few rows ahead, the one with no mention of them both being naked. The images were already lodged firmly in her mind, and not a single one suggested illness or assistance. They watched as Cara and the manager finally stood and walked slowly down the jetway, heading to the office to write up her statement as if it were the truth. Cara's head was still held high, Julie noticed with disbelief, and he, unbelievably, was nodding along as though he might actually believe her. The captain waited until they disappeared around the corner before turning to Julie. Well, that was a first, he said, shaking his head. Do you think he bought it? Julie exhaled slowly. Oh, who knows, she said with a shrug. In 30 years of flying, she had never come across anything like it. No one had ever been quite so brazen. Or was it just stupidity? She tried briefly to put herself inside Cara's head as the pair walked off the aircraft together, but quickly abandoned the attempt as the images of nakedness threatened to resurface. No, she doubted she would ever really get her head around it. And in that moment, she realised she didn't care to try. Right now, she did not give a hoot about understanding what had happened or guessing what might come next. All she wanted was her home, her dog, and a very large gin and tonic. The paperwork could wait until she'd fully decompressed and reclaimed her sanity. And that, she suspected, might take a while.
The Red Eye podcast is written by Kaylie Kay, narrated and produced by me, Ali Murphy. These stories are based on true events, but certain details, characters, and timelines have been altered to protect the innocent. Visit our website, theredeyepod.com, to subscribe to our newsletter and to find out details on how you can contribute your story for us to turn into an episode. If you enjoyed listening to our stories, please like, subscribe, and review. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Red Eye podcast. You guys are why we do this. We love the stories that you have, and we love telling you the stories that people share with us. To help us reach more people and get the podcast really out there, we would really appreciate it if you left a review. It just helps our podcast be a little bit more visible. Thank you.